Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker is Dr. Nortje from UNISA. A very interesting person. We had some dinner last night and some interesting stories. He's got a very interesting background. He's an independent consultant rendering consulting services to farmers with special emphasis on soil analysis, fertilizing recommendations and irrigation management. Also land use planning, environmental management, and impact assessments and resource surveys. He obtained his BSc degree, a BSc honours in soil science and plant nutrition, also his MPhil in wildlife management, his MSA in sustainable agriculture, and his PhD in wildlife management, and he's currently with UNISA. Gerhard will talk on the fertilization of macadamia nuts, and he promised me that before he's going to start his talk, he's going to tell us a nice joke.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity. My CV actually doesn't say, there's no connection to what I'm going to talk about now in my studies or something like that. But I worked 11.5 years for Subtrop and also for macadamias, where I coordinated the research. And I got some experience with fertilizing of macadamias, but also other subtropical crops. So I'm just going to talk a little bit and give you a background of the macadamia industry, and then specifically certain problems that we picked up practically in the field related to macadamia fertilization. Much research in macadamias has been done over the last 11.5 years, but almost nothing on fertilization in South Africa. Most research has been done in Australia, California, Hawaii, in those countries, and basically we still base a lot of our recommendations on that information. In short, macadamias need low levels of P and calcium, but high iron levels. Iron deficiencies show in tree dieback, gradual deterioration in the tree's condition with fewer and sparse leaves, lower production. It's a problem that we picked up about in 2011, and it's still ongoing. Macadamias, like most subtropical crops, require well-drained soil with pH water of not less than 5.5. NP and K levels should be replenished as required by the tree, including those removed by the crop every season. As I said, South Africa draws much on macadamia nutrition from Australia, California, and Hawaii. Common nutritional problems exist in all these countries, and some focus on practical experience. At the end of my presentation, I'll talk about that. The macadamia industry in South Africa is like growing, for me, almost unhealthily, uncomfortable. It's good that it's growing. The international macadamia market is just open there. Part of the whole nut industry, including all the nuts in the world, macadamias form only 3% of that. And the market is just open, and I think because of that, and the producers, they saw a gap there, and they're making a lot of money. So they've been growing since then. Since in 2012, we did a census. 19,000 hectares were established in South Africa, just below that. And since then, growing by 1,500 hectares per year. And now in South Africa, we're standing at 26,000 hectares. In Southern Africa, that figure is 2,000 more, about 28,000 hectares. And the growth rate is now more than that. I think it's close to 2,000 hectares per year. The biggest growth in South Africa is in Mpumalanga, and especially in northern KZN provinces, where they're even taking out some sugarcane and plant macadamias there. But Mpumalanga is still the largest producing province, with over 40% of the macadamias there and being established there. And then other provinces like the Southern Cape and Eastern Cape is also growing. Updated current forecast is 41,430,000 tons nut in shell on that moisture percentage, and it's a little bit lower than last season. A little bit on the macadamia tree. Is a member of the Fertasa family and native to the subtropical coastal rainforests of eastern Australia. Native trees can still be found in the few remaining small patches of natural subtropical forest in northern New South Wales and southern Queensland. There are 7 species of macadamia endemic to Australia, and 2 are grown for their edible nuts. One is integrifolia and the other one tetrafolia, which also is in South Africa. Macadamia trees are evergreen and grow slowly up to 12 to 15 meters after 10 to 15 years, and the first crop around after the 4th year. Beaumont cultivar remains the most widely cultivar used in South Africa. It forms like 49% of the cultivars used in South Africa, and then followed by A4 and 816. Currently, SAMAC is busy with cultivar trials, which was established, and a lot of more cultivars are evaluated in all the growing areas. Insects, especially bees, have an important role in pollination. Macadamias are not heavy feeders, and their lateral root systems with lots of fine roots and proteoid roots are extremely efficient in absorbing both phosphates and calcium, even in soils where concentrations of these nutrients are relatively low. This is just a photo of a proteotic root, and if you see that in your soils, it's a sign of healthy soil conditions and root system. For macadamia orchard and management and fertilization, the phenological cycle is the main driver of the timing of management inputs rather than a calendar. That's also a challenge. Certain farmers still prefer the calendar way of fertilizing, but that's changing. Can short be described as follows. In May, flower initiation, August, September, main flowering and root growth, in September, October, nut set, and then November to January, nut growth and oil accumulation, and March, April, and May, mature nut drop. Major fertilization is also starting here in July, actually, with first nitrogen and potassium, and applications, also rectifying your soil pH with lime, and then it goes on to here. So it's split applications of nitrogen and potassium, and the last nitrogen is applied here in January, 10% of the total per annum, but also boron and zinc are very important for macadamias. This is just a phenological chart, and it's described to you, as you can see here in July, 25% of your nitrogen, 25% of your calcium, and then later in September, 40% of your nitrogen, 50% of your calcium. So it's split applications. Crop nutrient removal, a yield of 3.5 tons nut in shell per hectare, which is average for the industry. We remove about 63 kilograms of nitrogen, 3.5 kgs of phosphate, 70 kilograms of potassium, and 17.5 of sulfur. The aim of a fertilization program should be to keep the tree and the root system healthy, and to replace at least these amounts of nutrients that's taken, that are used by the tree. Leaf and soil sampling. Soil sampling should be done every 2 years, while leaf samples should be taken from marked trees every year. This is sufficient to monitor soil fertility over time. A history of soil fertility and nutrient status in orchards should be built over time. Leaf samples must be taken during October and November each year by sampling the 4th leaf behind the growing point of an active growing shoot, or the shoot that has recently completed a growth flush. Only leaves from healthy plants should be taken. And now I'm getting to like problems and challenges with regards to fertilization. As I said, not a lot of South African fertilization research has been done. So we, basically the macadamia industry is taken the norms and standards from Australia, Hawaii, and these countries. And I think that's kind of a problem. We've done well with that, adapting it to different areas in such a way that we average 3.5 to 4 tons a hectare, and even in some cases 5, in extreme cases 8 tons a hectare by good farmers. So we're doing not badly by that, but we should do our own research on that. Since 2011, 2012, this is macadamia trees showing very severe nutrient deficiency symptoms correctly identified as iron deficiencies, or showing as tree dieback eventually. And this is what we've seen this in smaller trees growing on the same, just planted, first 2-3 years, no symptoms. As soon as the trees start getting older, the root system develop, and then they don't keep up and they cannot sustain the tree. That's one of the things. Another one, Bray 1 soil P levels of over 50 milligrams per kilogram have negative impacts on macadamia crop performance. So these what I'm talking about, all practical things that we picked up, we did analysis, and we solved the problems, getting to answers. The Bray 1 soil P levels in the problem orchards, also mentioned above, and that was up in Levubu area and Barberton area, 2 areas I'm talking about, always exceeded 100 milligrams per kilogram, in most cases over 200, and even 300 and 400 milligrams per kilogram. And that's a problem because macadamia is easily taking up phosphates also. Application of chicken manure. In some cases, farmers have been applying 30 tons of chicken manure per hectare per year, whereas one would normally recommend 2 tons per hectare per year. The problem here is also manure and compost that's not analyzed and sourced correctly. Crop K application responses on soils where citrus gave positive responses to K. There were no yield responses by, for instance, and this is South African research in 1986 done by the ARC. No yield responses by papaya, lychee, avocado, coffee, and macadamia nuts, and pecan nuts. Sensitivity to iron deficiencies. Macadamias developed initially on highly weathered soils with abundant plant available of iron in high rainfall areas in Australia. Therefore, the trees are very sensitive to iron deficiencies. Plant soil analysis results from macadamia orchards with serious iron deficiencies. A common feature there was that the soils had extremely high P levels. So the conclusion was that it's P-induced iron deficiencies. Macadamia is extremely vulnerable to high P levels as well. Highly weathered acid soils in Australia and this extremely low plant available P levels. Therefore, they have developed root systems that feed exceptionally well on P. Due to this ability to feed very strongly on P, they absorb very high amounts of P with soils from adequate amounts of that. Unfavorable high pH levels. Publications from Hawaii indicate that iron deficiencies in macadamias are found where the soil pH is very high. The pH water should preferably not be higher than between 5.5 and 6, or pH KCl between 4.5 and 5. The effect of the combination is high pH and very high P levels on Fe nutrition is disastrous for macadamia trees. The pH of KCl of 6.5 is far too high. And I'll get now to the norms that we're using, which need to be checked. Subsoil compaction and nutrient deficiencies, several cases of iron deficiency symptoms. They found nutrients cannot be taken up, therefore iron deficiencies. In Barberton area, especially on tobacco soils, previously planted, very fine sandy soils, farmers coming in, they planted macadamias, and this is where I said younger trees, no problems. As the trees grow older, they picked up these problems. And we went there and we dug profiles, and heavy compacted layers were found below, so the big trees cannot be sustained. At the bottom of that was water, the top totally dry. The younger trees were still going well. So our opinion is that, you know, in the first 2 years, or the first year that you lose trees, that's better than you lose your trees at that age. That has crops, that's producing. That's a real problem. That is just a photo of how it looks like. Sometimes you get a whole block of trees that's dying back, especially where you get the subsoil compaction problem with it. But that's a tree dieback, iron deficiencies, and they die randomly. This is subsoil compaction. You see the roots growing laterally, horizontally, breaking up. That's the first thing we do to get some water in and break up the compacted layers. And you know, crusting is part of the problem to get water in. So it all starts with land preparation. Just about the norms quickly. As I said there, this is the norms currently used by the industry. But this is not the standard norms. There's various norms that are used. I just compile it in one as one document. But I could find 5, 6 different norms tables that are used out in the industry. P, they say they over 100 is toxic, but P over 50, as I said, gave us problems. So that should be revised. I'm not sure about the iron, where the iron comes from. This I got in a document, but we didn't have it at SAMAC. And some of these others. My opinion is that there's too many of these. Some of the norms are too wide. So we need to start urgently to do in South Africa, especially when we're going to now do the cultivar trials in all production areas, different soil types, different climate. Cultivars vary. So that's going to start creating problems. Soil amelioration and preparation, the correction of soil acidity, very important. In many cases, also phosphate levels should be done during land preparation and therefore before planting. Ameliorants such as lime, gypsum, potassium, and phosphate. Thorough incorporation of these soil ameliorants and the aeration of the soil, facilitated by deep ripping, will provide an optimal environment for root development. What's currently happening in the industry is more and more all new plantings going on ridges. Almost no new plantings on flat soil. Ridges are prepared. Macadamias need lots of organic material, like most subtropical crops. So incorporation of as much as possible compost, up to 10 tons per hectare prior to planting, is an added benefit, especially on sandy soils. Beware of using large volumes of chicken manure as well as dairy manure in the compost, as the high phosphate proportion of chicken manure can lead to phosphate-induced iron deficiencies, where chicken manure-rich compost is used continuously over a number of years. Immediately after planting non-bearing trees, this is the practice. Trees need to be given time to settle into the new environment, overcome any transplanting shock, and for the roots to begin growing out of the potting medium into the surrounding soil. So it's appropriate not to apply any fertilizer in the first 6 to 8 weeks, and then bearing trees 4 years and plus. And analysis of the analytical data is more meaningful when recommendations are based on the historical trends rather than only 1 year's results. So we look back over, as far as possible, build up records of specific blocks and orchards, fertilized and analyzed. Any nutrition management program must take the following into account: a visual appraisal of the trees, including yield data, historical soil analysis data, historical leaf analysis data, and previous fertilization programs. So I've said, although the Australian and Hawaiian guidelines on the fertilization of macadamias, as well as many years of experience in macadamia production and fertilization, have done well for the commercial production in South Africa, we need urgently to start our own research on macadamia nutrition. South African climatic conditions and soils differ widely from those in Australia and Hawaii, so the guidelines developed for those countries and for their conditions cannot just be copied and applied somewhere else. Research on different cultivars with regards to crop nutrient removals, nutrient norms, and the different climatic conditions and different soil types, and what is currently being done with regards to irrigation research. We're doing currently of the macadamia industry irrigation research, where they include all these things, different cultivars, most important one, different soils, different climatic conditions. This should be copied to determine this as well. This is very important. And this is in short. Thank you.
Not familiar with us. I think we're more familiar with the P-induced zinc deficiencies. Are you sure that that was the case, or wasn't it sort of confounded with high pHs? You've also mentioned high pH effect on iron deficiencies. But are you sure that it was induced by too high P levels rather than high pH, rather than high pH?
We haven't done any further on that, but what I've said, the combination of the two, it seems. So this is just by observations and analysis, that's what we've done, and deductions what we've done. So we haven't done any further work on that. Say it's either the high pH or it's a P induced. But we found, where we have the iron deficiencies, we found in most cases both of them together, high P and high pHs.
Oh, both of them. So you're not...
Lots of cases.
In a lot of cases. So what I'm getting at is that it might be due to the high pH and not because of the high P that you've got the iron deficiency.
There's a strong link between established out of work from Hawaii and Australia that shows that it's iron that's the problem, both in terms of uptake as well as the physiological availability of iron that's already in the plant. So macadamias gluttonize on phosphate. They really have developed a root system that scour very efficiently for phosphate. So we probably see a lot of zinc and other trace element issues, as well as calcium, in high phosphate situations.
I just want to add a comment there. As with zinc, if you add nitrogen, it enhances the zinc uptake. So it might be the same situation with iron. If you add nitrogen, you might have an enhanced iron uptake as well. And often that is forgotten, in the process.
It comes back to what I'm saying. We need to investigate this and do some work on it.
Okay.
And this is what's needed.
Yeah, okay, fine. I've got one, if you'll allow me, Chairman, I've got one other remark that I want to make, and maybe you want to respond to that. Is the high levels of chicken manure. You've mentioned they go to 30 tons per hectare. Now, I've seen cases where you have reduction in maize production where they it didn't go that high, but up to 20 tons. And then 2 years after, they still got a reduction in yield for maize. So, but it's not only ascribed to the fact that IP levels have developed. It's also ascribed to very high nitrogen levels and maybe nitrogen toxicity effects and other things. Yeah, that's all I want to mention. I think it's rather excessive.
I think the application, if you've seen these applications of these manures, not in compost, but manure by itself, sourced from places that we don't have analytical data on it, and they put it below each tree this thick. So that creates a problem, a physical problem immediately. And then you start seeing symptoms after that, time after that, and you see it in the leaves and these kind of symptoms. So that is a problem.
Okay.
But I agree.
Wat is eintlik die oorsaak van daai hoë pH in die gronde wat jy gekry het? Want natuurlik is ons gronde glad nie so hoog in fosfaat en nie. So iewers die ouens baie pH gaan gooi teen hulle sin of iets anders ter het veroorsaak. En dit is eintlik die ding waar die hele ding begin.
Wat ek wil sê is 'n kombinasie, ek dink pH-bemesting en dan jy tesame met hierdie mis wat jy toedien en dit word nie in ag geneem nie. En dis waar die pH vandaan kom, die hoë pH in kunsmis wat jy gee en dan hierdie goed wat jy nie van jy het nie data daarvan nie. Jy dien dit toe en dan en omdat 'n macadamia tree boom ook so geredelik fosfaat vinnig opneem. En dis wat die probleem veroorsaak.
Letterlik gewees killing with kindness.
Gerard, are macadamia trees readily colonized by mycorrhiza? Do you know?
Not at all. There's no mycorrhizal relationship in the Proteaceae.
At all? And the endotrichoderma at all? Are you aware?
No, not aware. I don't know.
Gerhard, many years ago, we identified phosphate toxicity in different plants, especially wheat and maize. The industry in South Africa never wanted to recognize that statement. Your problem is probably not a deficiency of iron or whatsoever, it's a phosphate toxicity. Many years ago, the Australians actually found that if they have excess phosphate and they add zinc, that symptoms disappear because the toxicity of phosphate looks very similar to zinc deficiency. So it's not a question of zinc deficiency, it's a phosphate toxicity which you inhibited by adding zinc, which is complexed in the root system with the phosphates. I'm not sure whether the iron is the same case. I think you didn't mention anything about zinc, but I think the relationship is rather something like to do with zinc. But phosphate toxicity is a reality, and especially the Proteaceae. And it also, when you place 20 or 30 kilograms phosphate in this land, you toxify the plant with phosphate. The zinc is there to alleviate the phosphate toxicity. So I'm quite sure it's not zinc deficiency or iron deficiency because that norms that you're giving there can't show zinc deficiency in any plant which I know. 200 parts per million, it's a hell of a lot of iron in the plant. That can't show any deficiency.
Thank you, Prof. I just want to say that if you have, when I talked about the subsoil compaction, you have no roots that going in, cannot penetrate, get to the water, they cannot also take up any, so you're going to get deficiency of most nutrients, iron, manganese, and all those kind of things. So that may be, in that case, play a role.
Henk?
I can maybe just make a comment on the high phosphorus that is in the soil already. In the Lowveld area, traditionally they produced a lot of tobacco, and that old tobacco lands has got a lot of phosphorus in it already. So now they are planting, switching over to macadamias, so that they inherit actually that phosphorus in the soil. They do make the problem bigger for themselves by adding chicken litter, heavy amounts like Gerhardus mentioned. But just a comment on that question.
Macadamia is also a pioneer because, you know, compared to the proteas and cycads, those things don't require much phosphate. The less you give them, the better. If you've got levels of 30 and 50 in excess, you must pick up problems. Whether it's, obviously, iron phosphate is much less soluble than zinc phosphate, for instance. So that could be one of the secondary effects. Also the use of chicken manure. If you put down 30 tons of chicken manure, you raise your soil P level by 30 milligrams per kilogram. So that's why you're getting levels of 100 and that type of thing. So one's got to keep in mind, keep phosphates away. You should actually just at planting put down probably a tricalcium phosphate type thing for that type of tree. They react much better. Thanks.
I just want to add, if you combine any 2+ cation with phosphate, it becomes insoluble, an insoluble compound, so it won't be plant available. So that's where the iron deficiency comes from, as well as the zinc deficiency that will also will happen. And then the moment you put something like sulfate, any kind of sulfate to the picture, then if you combine a sulfate with 2+ cations, it becomes a soluble compound. So maybe that's something you can think about.